Kit Harington's brutal thoughts on Jon Snow spin-off before claiming he was done with Game of Thrones for good. Good day, Westerosi watchers. If you thought the Night's Watch vows were dramatic, wait until you hear the emotional roller coaster Kit Harington put fans through with his comments about the Jon Snow spin-off. One moment he is teasing the possibility of returning as the brooding king in the north. The next he is saying he is done with the cold, the snow, and the emotional trauma of carrying the entire series on his back. Before we dive into the bold contradictions and painfully honest truths behind Kit's statements, make sure you subscribe to Westeros Throne and click that notifications bell so you never miss the hot takes, icy insights, and fiery debates we bring straight out of the Seven Kingdoms. Now let us unravel this saga, because Kit Harington's journey with Jon Snow has more twists than Littlefinger's political strategies. The first punch lands with Kit's brutally candid reflections about the proposed Jon Snow spin-off. When news broke that HBO was exploring a sequel following Jon Beyond the Wall, fans reacted like someone had announced the dragons were being resurrected. Cheers, tears, hopeful theories. Everyone was ready to march back into the snow. But then Kit opened up about how emotionally exhausted he was after 8 seasons of stoic suffering. He explained that playing Jon took a physical and mental toll, and for a while, he wanted space from that darkness. That honesty hit fans like a Valyrian steel dagger, but not in a bad way. It showed how much the character meant to him, and how deeply he had lived inside Jon's quiet pain. And now we glide into the next section, because this contradiction becomes the heartbeat of today's story. Kit's commentary arrives like a storm, blunt, honest, and a little painful. He admitted that after the Game of Thrones finale, he needed to step away. He wanted to disconnect from a character who spent 8 seasons being stabbed, betrayed, banished, and told he knew nothing. And honestly, who would not want a break? Jon's life is so tragic that even the ghosts in the haunted forest probably pity him. Kit mentioned that he needed to rediscover himself outside the role, a statement that shows just how heavy the character was to carry. For an actor, shedding a role that intense takes time and guts. But here is where it gets interesting. Even after saying he was done, Kit still entertained the idea of the spin-off. And he did it with surprising enthusiasm. He said he had been developing ideas. He talked about exploring Jon's emotional state after killing Daenerys. He hinted that there was unfinished business out there in the snow. For a man who claimed he was finished, he sounded an awful lot like someone packing his bags for another trip beyond the wall. The conflicting statements are not random. They show how complicated Kit's relationship is with Jon Snow. This is a character that defined his career. It catapulted him to worldwide fame. It gave him some of the most iconic scenes in modern television. But it also demanded years of emotional immersion in trauma, sacrifice, and internal conflict. It is understandable that Kit might feel torn, drawn to the character's depth, but wary of its weight. This emotional push and pull mirrors the very essence of Jon Snow. Jon himself is always caught between desires and duties, between love and war, between what he wants and what he must do. Kit feeling conflicted is almost poetic, as if Jon's spirit lingers in his thoughts. Now, let us shift gears into the next part, the fan reactions to these comments. The moment Kit said he was done, the fandom split like the Night's Watch during a leadership vote. Some fans accepted it, pointing out that the actor deserved peace. Others treated it like a betrayal worse than anything in the Red Wedding, and a good number refused to believe him. They argued that actors always say they are done until the right script, the right director, or the right paycheck appears. In other words, nobody took done as final. Not in a world where dead characters come back and dragons hatch from stone. Then came the twist. Sources revealed that while Kit was publicly downplaying the spin-off, he was privately involved in its early development. That revelation set the fandom ablaze. Suddenly people wondered if his interviews were strategic deflections. Maybe he wanted to manage expectations. Maybe HBO wanted secrecy. Maybe Kit simply did not know what he truly wanted yet. And honestly, that might be the closest truth. Let us move to the next hook, because this part has major implications for the future of the franchise. Kit has always been vocal about protecting the integrity of Jon Snow. He said that if the character ever returned, it had to be for a story that had meaning, not a nostalgic cash grab. This is where his brutal thoughts make sense. He was not rejecting Jon. He was rejecting mediocrity. He said he did not want a spin-off that undermined the ending of Game of Thrones or cheapened Jon's sacrifice. If anything, his comments show he is fiercely protective of the character's legacy. This protective stance becomes even more significant when we remember how controversial the final season was. The ending, whether you loved it or loathed it, left Jon with a bittersweet fate. He lost Daenerys, rejected the Iron Throne, and returned to the wilderness. Kit knows that revisiting Jon requires a narrative powerful enough to justify reopening that wound. And he is not wrong. People care too much about Jon Snow to accept anything less than excellence. Now we move to another, because behind all this is a deeper truth. Kit Harington is an actor who matured. Back during the early seasons, Kit was still growing into the craft. By the later seasons, he had become a refined performer who understood the weight of his character and the expectations of the world watching him. When he speaks about the emotional burden now, it comes with self-awareness. He is no longer the young actor navigating fame. He is a seasoned professional who understands the value of protecting his mental health and artistic identity. The decision to step away was not dramatic. It was necessary. And the openness with which he shared that journey struck fans with a rare honesty. Not many actors speak so candidly about burnout tied to a beloved character. It is refreshing, even if it disappoints those hoping for immediate news of a spin-off. Because this saga also reveals how HBO handles the future of the Game of Thrones universe. The network has multiple projects in development, from animated shows to high-budget epics like House of the Dragon. The Jon Snow sequel was one of the most talked about, but also one of the most secretive. Kit's involvement, even in early conceptual stages, shows that HBO trusted him to help shape the direction. But it also shows that nothing was ever guaranteed. Not the production, not the timeline, and certainly not Kit's return. Kit Harington's brutal thoughts were not rejections. They were reflections. Honest, emotional, and rooted in protecting both himself and the character. He was done until he was not. He rejected the role until he explored new directions. He stepped away until he felt curiosity stir again. The contradictions simply reveal a man wrestling with a character he loved, struggled with, and carried for a decade. And that, in its own way, is fitting. Jon Snow has always been a character defined by conflict, and so is Kit's relationship with him. Thank you for watching.